Hello, welcome to the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. In today's video, I have set up a new template for you. It's an update of an update, but I've done some extra things for you to help you out with your mixing in the MPC. The first template I did was for the MPC 2 software. That is still available. Then I did an update for the MPC 3 beta, which is also still available. But this is an update to that with loads more goodies in it. Just loads of stuff to help you mix in the MPC, just help you out, help you get started. Let's jump in. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the template. You can skip the entire video and just download the template for you, absolutely free. However, and this isn't just applied to get you to watch the entire video. However, the reason why it might be worth watching or going back to reference, etc., is because this template is quite generic. It will need tweaking to suit your personal workflow. So therefore, it's worth watching the video so you understand the choices that I've made. And this template is set up from years of experience. It's pretty much a carbon copy of what I have set up in my DAW when I'm mixing for clients. So there are decisions that I've made that have gone into making this template. And if you don't understand those decisions, then when you try and reset things up yourself to suit your workflow, you might not really understand what's going on. So it's there to help you. So as I said, by all means, skip to the end or just download the template, share it, do whatever you want to do with it, but it's worth referencing the video. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's explain the template. It's obviously an update for MPC 3. I've colored everything. It's all color coded. It's color coded the same way my DAW template is set up. Now, how I've got it set up in terms of tracks, I just have one drum track and one audio track. Okay, you can add as many tracks as you want. Obviously, if you just duplicate, it's going to copy the drum track. You'd have to add your own plugin track. Obviously, same with the audio tracks. You could just duplicate it. Now, the way that it's set up in terms of mixing, if we go to the mix page, everything is set up to -6 dB. This is going to help you get started with gain staging. It's not going to mix the track for you, but what it's going to do is it's going to put you in a place straight away where you're not clipping the master out. You haven't got overs. You're not distorting. Everything's is going to be a little bit more under control. Get that one out. So it's not -6 dB is not where you should leave the faders, but it's going to put you in a good position to get started and not have to worry about things. And that's the point of a template. The point of a template is that you can just jump in, get working. You don't have to think about things too much. And I've explained that many times. So as you can see, track 1, the drum track and the audio track are set up at -6. If I scroll across to the submixes, you can see that they're color coded. And they're also set to -6. I've used 6 of the submixes here, so there's 2 left there for you to add your own things. The returns are set up as well with reverb delay and New York comp, which is parallel compression. It's just an easier way of saying it. New York comp's what I've always called it. And then the master out. But as you can see, everything is set to -6. And this will just help you gain stage. It will help you not clip, not get overs, not get distortion, not be banging into the red. Not that there's anything wrong with banging into the red, but it can start sounding crap once you start piling things on. So let's come back out, and what we're going to do is we're going to explain things. And what I've done here, the additions to this template compared to my old MPC 3 template, the last one that I did, is that I've set up the submixes for you and the returns and the master and everything. It's all color coded, as I said, but I've also set up an effects chain. Now, this effects chain's not gospel. It's not written in stone. You can change it. You can shift things around. You can take out plugins. You can add plugins, but it's basically based on years of experience of me mixing for clients and the template that I have set up in my DAW, and it's kind of set up in such a way that I have a compressor where I need it, an EQ where I need it, and I don't really have to think too much. But obviously it gets tweaked. It's not default. I don't do a mix for a client and it stays like this. However, it does put me in a good place where I don't have to think too much. I don't have to think as much. I can just be creative. And that's the whole point of it. So I haven't added anything on the track or the audio because obviously that's going to be its own thing. It's completely different. It changes every time. But what we'll jump into is the submixes. So the way that I've got the submixes set up, actually it'd be easier if we scroll through here, won't it? Yeah, okay. So submix 1 is drums. I always have this as red. It's kind of red. I think it's called Fire on the MPC. And the way that I have, and so obviously if you want to send all your drums to this submix, you will send on your send channel as you can see, sends next to effects, and you will send to submix 1. So we want to send all our drums to submix 1. I've made a video that explains submixes. It's fairly straightforward, but that's what you need to do. Send all your drums to submix 1 if you want them to be going through this chain. And then in submix 1, as I said, I've named it drums, it's color coded. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the effects chain. Now, as I said, this isn't written in stone, but this is a pretty standard generic drum bus setup. Let's think of these submixers as buses. So number 1, see, I've not just put the effects in there, I've also set the effect up for you as well. I'll show you. Okay, so number 1, air compressor. The reason why I use air compressor, it's quite transparent and it does, it does the job. So the way I've got it set up is fairly standard drum bus, 3:1 ratio, 4:1 might be something I would go for if I wanted a kind of DBX 160 sound, a bit more punchy, a bit more, punchy, I guess the DBX 160 does. So I've set the ratio to 3:1. I've set your attack to 30 so it doesn't cut into the transients, and it's a fast release. So that's a nice punchy drum bus setup for you. That's the compression, and that's the first thing that you would do. I've set up the threshold and the output at 0, so you can adjust that as you need to. Next, we have the air power EQ. Actually, let's just go back and turn that off. I also have all of the effects chains are all turned off, so you're going to need to turn them on. But the reason why I've got them turned off is because when you first start putting sounds in there, you don't want the effects on there straight away because you're going to be like, why does that sound like that? So everything's turned off for you. As I said, all the effects chains are set up, and I've set up each effect individually as well, and it's all turned off. So number 2 on the drum bus, air power EQ. The way that I've got the EQ set up, again, it's a fairly standard drum bus setup, but you will need to tweak it. We've got 60 Hertz shelf because that's kind of where the fundamental of the kick is most of the time. 200 Hertz to get rid of any kind of mud. 5K for clarity, and then an 8K shelf. That's a very standard, I would say that's a standard drum bus, but it's a standard kind of bus setup, to be honest. With the low cut, I've got that set up for you at 30 Hertz, but again, you're going to need to adjust that. But that's kind of where you need it if you want to get rid of all the subs and you don't want anything to sound too messy. So moving on to the next one, we have tube drive. Everything's set to 0 for you. Tube drive, I've explained in a video, adds a nice bit of saturation. Kind of, you can have tape saturation, you can have real kind of guitar pedal saturation, but it brings out the harmonics and it just adds a little bit of bite to the mix. Very, very subtle on a bus mix. I wouldn't go over the top, but I've got that set up for you. And then finally at number 4, MPC 60. As I've said 1 million times, the MPC 60 vintage mode doesn't sound like an MPC 60, but it does add a really nice bottom end to the mix, which is why I use it. There's other vintage modes on there, but I tend to use 60, the MPC 60. It's my favorite one. Not keen on the 1200 or the 3000, but not because they don't sound like those machines, because they don't, but because they don't do it for me. MPC 3000 is a bit middly, and the SP1200s, I don't really kind of know what it is, but I don't like it. That's a personal opinion, obviously. So MPC 60 at the end of the drum bus, and you might have seen me do that before. That's fairly standard. So if we come back out, now we go into the bass. So this is where you want to send your bass sounds. Again, I've set the effects chain up for you. So let's go into number 1, which is, again, air compressor. So the way I've set this up is kind of a bass compression. It would be maybe the way that LA3 would be set up, which is a compressor that I would tend to use for bass. And really, bass compression is just kind of about leveling things out. You don't really want too much compression. You don't really want to hear compression on a bass track most of the time. Sometimes you can, it's absolutely fine, but most of the time you don't really want to hear the actual compression. You just want to level things out. So a bit of a quicker attack just to kind of round the transients off a little bit, and a bit of a longer release as well. So that's, a kind of, again, I want to say standard. It might not be the right word, but it's a kind of generic, general bass compression setup. But you will need to tweak it, but it's set up for you, ready to go. Let's just turn that off again. Air maximizer. Now, air maximizer, what it does, and I have explained this in the video, is it's kind of doing some upward compression and some downward compression. So what it's going to do is it's going to help you level out again. It's the closest that you can get to the Waves MV2, which is a plugin that I use a lot, and I know a lot of other people do as well. But it isn't a Waves MV2. I just want to point that out before anyone says at the bottom, this is not a Waves MV2. But what it does is it maximizes, and what it's going to do is it's going to bring the noise floor up a little bit and just balance things out. Because what you do often find with a bass is the dynamic range is quite a lot. You've got a lot of loud notes, especially if you're slapping. I'm talking about live bass here. And then you've got low notes where you're just maybe fingering the bass strings. Ooh. And so what I often do with Waves MV2 is I use it to bring up the quieter notes and just level things out, not flatten it out completely so that every note is the same. You do still want a bit of dynamic range, but it just helps the maximizer. Then into a bit of EQ. The low shelf is set up at 80 here because I don't really want it to clash with the fundamental of the kick drum. But again, as I said, this is generic. This is not exactly how it should be, so you need to tweak it. But I've set these up just to give you a bit of an idea. You don't really need to use the high mids so much. You might need to if you're using a live bass. You might just want to hear the sound of the fingering. Get your mind out the gutter, guys. And the low cutoff is down at sort of 50 hertz again, because I don't want it to clash with the fundamental of the kick drum. But again, you will need to adjust that. And then again, MPC 60, because like I said previously, it does a really nice thing to the low end. So that's your bass. Next, synths. Synths is always pink for me. I don't know why, it just always has been. We go into the effects chain here, and we have air compressor. It's kind of set up the way that a bus compression would be. Again, synths are one of those instruments that you don't necessarily want to compress too much, although that's not a rule. You can compress them as much as you like. But what I've done here is set up a kind of mixed bus style compressor. So it's a lower ratio, a longer attack, and a bit of a longer release than I would have on the drums. So there's a bit of snappiness there, but not too much. But it's entirely going to depend on what synths you're using. But bear in mind, this is a submix, this is a bus channel, so this is going to be where you throw a whole load of synths. It's not going to be a single synth. If you want to mix a single synth, I would suggest mixing that on the insert on the actual program, on the actual channel. Number 2 on there, EQ. Haven't really done very much with this, but I've kind of set it up the way that I would set up a lead guitar, because often we're using synths as lead instruments, but obviously also you can use them as a pad. Sorry, you can use pads and etc. on synths as well. So again, like I said, it's quite generic. The roll off at the top is generally anything over 8K. Again, this isn't a rule, but this is generally, you don't really need with synths. And quite often there can be some weird stuff going on up top that you just want to get rid of. So I've rolled off for you here the low cut and the high cut, just to kind of help in the mix. So there's the mud's cut out. You've got your mud channel here at low mid 200 hertz. You've got your 1.5 there, which is kind of where your lead stuff would be with guitar and vocals. And then it's just a bit of a higher, I've actually changed it to a bell, but it's a 5K, and that brings out the clarity. Shelf on the low end. Air vintage filter, because it's just decent to have on synths. That I haven't really done very much with. I've just kind of zeroed things out for you. And then air tube drive at the end. I've explained air tube drive in another video, but just quickly, it just adds some harmonics, some saturation, some drive, and just does the kind of sound toys decapitator thing, and just it can really help it poke out in the mix. But be subtle with it. Again, remember, this is a mix bus, not an individual instrument. So that's your synths. Guitars, if you use guitars. This is going to be very similar to the synths. So we've got air compressor. It's a bit more compression on guitars. I just tend to like to use a DBX 160 again on guitars. So I've squashed your transients a little bit, so it's a quicker attack. It's a slower release. The ratio is a bit higher. Into your EQ, it's very, very similar to your synths. Not much difference there, to be honest. Same roll-offs, same setups here. Tube drive, just because I love putting it on everything, but it's really, really good on guitars, and I've shown that in a video. And then finally, air flavor. So here is where you can add like an amp, etc. if you want to. There's various different things that you can do with it, but I've just got it set up on there for you. So if you're a guitarist, straight away you've got your channel set up, your compression, your EQ, your tube drive saturation, and then your amp at the end. You can rearrange that as well, obviously. It doesn't have to stay like that. Next, we have sample. And what I mean by sample is if you've sampled in a track. Now, obviously, when you sample in tracks, you've got the whole track, and you need to treat it as a whole track. So that's what this channel's for. So it's kind of like a mix bus, the way that it's set up, and that's shown here in the actual chain. We have your compressor to start with, very, very simple mix bus, slow attack, fast release, low ratio. So that's kind of how I would have a G bus on an SSL setup. Then you're going into your EQ, again, very, very general. I haven't touched that at all because obviously every sample is going to be different. You've got your lo-fi in there straight away if you want to start playing around with it and adding some character. So you can change that to make it sound a bit grittier, etc., by changing the bit and the sample rate. And then finally, MPC 60 again. There we go. That's your sample setup. Now, obviously, bear in mind, sample is very, very wide. So what I've done there, as I explained, is it's set up the way that I would set a mix bus up, basically. Your master out, almost. Okay, moving on to vocals. I've made a video on mixing vocals in the MPC. So if you want more detail on that, watch that video. Here's your chain. Starting with Air Vocal Tuner. Now, I've put that on there. It's not the best vocal tuner in the world, but if you're in a bit of a tight spot and you need to do some vocal tuning in the MPC, I've heard a lot of people say they prefer to mix their vocals outside the MPC, and that's absolutely fine. I tend to as well. But just in case you want to mix your vocals in the MPC, you want to do a quick demo, or you've just got your Live 2 or your MPC 1 and you go around somebody's house and you want to make a complete track, completely standalone, I've set this up for you. So you've got your tuner. You can use that. It's not great, but it does the job. Into your compressor. Now, the way that I've got this set up is, I'm going to make a video on this actually. It's nothing new. It's an age-old technique where you use two compressors. The first compressor you use to catch the peaks with quite a high ratio, which is what I've done here for you. That would be something like an 1176, quite a fast attack. Actually, I'd probably take that a little bit lower, but it's at 28.5 at the moment. And a quick release, that's just to catch the peaks. Then you have a second compressor, which would be an opto compressor like an LA2 or an LA3. And I've set that up for you to kind of act a bit like an LA2, but it's not an LA2 and it's not an LA3, but I've kind of set it up. So the point is, compressor 1, catch the peaks, compressor 2, just kind of balances everything out. That's a really, really nice way to get a good, tight, in-your-face vocal. And then finishing up with your EQ. The way that I've got this set up, I've rolled off the low end for you, but you can go much higher than that if you want. I've got the low set up here so that you can push the body of a vocal. It's at 144 at the moment, but the body's going to change depending on the vocal. You've got your mud channel to roll any mud out. You've got a bit of clarity that you have in your vocals at like 1.5-ish, but obviously again, that changes, but that's kind of the area where it is. And then for a bit of excitement, I've put an 8K shelf, and we all know 8K is the exciting frequency. That's your vocals. So that is your submixes, all done and dusted. Now we go into returns. Return 1 is your reverb. Now you can choose which reverb you want to use, but the way that I've got it set up for you here is it's air reverb because it's a very, very good general reverb. And then you go into your EQ. Now the way that I've got this EQ set up is called the Abbey Road reverb trick. And basically the argument is that on a reverb, you don't need anything below 600 Hertz and you don't need anything above 8, 9, 10K. So I've got it set up for you here, rolled off at 10K and rolled off at 600 Hertz in the lows. You can change that, but what that really does is it gets rid of too much kind of sizzle and it's not going to reverb the sibilance, etc., that you might have in a vocal. And it's also going to get rid of any kind of mud, which can build up very, very quickly in reverb. So you roll off a lot at the low end. Again, it's not a rule, but that's kind of the Abbey Road, well-known technique. I didn't invent it, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be called Abbey Road, it'd be called Conan. And so you've got your EQ and that's set up. So that comes after your reverb. Then moving on to your delays, you've got a delay on return 2, set up in a very, very similar way. You have air delay. Again, you can choose the delay you want to use, but I've used air delay because it's a very, very general EQ, a very general delay. Next, you've got your power EQ set up in a similar way with the lows and the highs rolled off. Exactly the same Abbey Road technique. Number 3, we have New York Comp, parallel compression. There's a ton of videos on it, but basically I've just got that set up for you if you want to use it. And we have air compressor set up with what you want to do with New York compression just quickly is it's basically the point of it is, in layman's terms, is to have some of the dry signal mixed with a compressed signal. But what you often do is you over compress it. So you smash it So you can really, really hear the compression, and then you blend that compressed signal back in with the dry signal, and it sounds amazing if you get it right. So I've got that set up for you. It's at a 4:1 ratio. You can go much, much higher than that if you like. Long attack, so it's not crushing the transits too much, but sometimes you might want to do that, and a quick release. So that's set up for you for New York parallel compression, return 4 I've left blank. The master out. I've done a video on this. This is not going to be anything new to you because you've seen me do this a ton of times. We have air compressor set up as a bus compressor, so low ratio, slow attack, fast release. Power EQ set up as a bus EQ. It's fairly self-explanatory. Air tube drive, be subtle. Be very, very subtle on the master out, or don't. But I tend to be very, very subtle. So you're not adding more than about 5% drive, and you're not adding more than, say, 10 to 15% saturation. But it just gives the whole mix a bit of bite. And then obviously, to finish off, air limiter. So that's basically it. I've tried to explain that as quickly as I can. I've tried to speak as quickly as I can. And I hope that I've managed to get it into a video that's less than half an hour, but I won't know until I've edited it. I'm going to stop speaking quickly now. So as you can see, it's all set up for you to start mixing. But the way that I've set it up obviously also means, because everything's turned off, it's not necessarily a mix template, it's just a template that you can use to start a track, and then you're in a good place to mix straight away. Some people like to mix as they go along. This template is going to be perfect for that. But because everything's turned off, if you want to mix afterwards, it's not going to affect anything whilst you're actually making the track. You just need to remember to turn things on as you go, as I said. So each individual effects chain, etc. So now just let me explain quickly. If you want to make changes to this, you will make your changes. You'll load up my template. You'll make the changes. You will go into project as, you'll make your changes, and then you save as template. It's really, really simple. Just remember where you've saved it. Okay. Now, when you want to have access to it as a template, and I've explained this in a video recently, but I will explain it again quickly now. If you go into preferences, if you go into project, load, save, you have these choices here. Make sure this is set to demo template recent, because then it gives you the option of a template, and just underneath it is where you choose where your template is. So you will hit the magnifying glass there, the browser symbol, and you'll go to where your template is and select that. And then when you hit new project, in the bottom left hand corner, you will have user template, and you can choose that. It's as simple as that. You can use my template exactly as is, or you can change it, resave it, make it your own, share it, do whatever you want to do with it. But that's how you set it up, and that's just make sure that you've got new project dialog set to demo template recent, because then it gives you the option as user template. So there you have it. I think I've kept this under 30 minutes. I hope I have, and I hope I didn't talk too quickly. But what you can do is you can go back through and you can reference it. I hope that you did watch all of the video, because it explains my choices, and that's going to make it a lot easier to understand if you want to start changing things yourself. If you haven't watched the whole video and you're just watching this outro part, I'm saying to you, it's going to be a good idea if you go back and watch at least some of it, so that you understand the choices that I've made to build the template. And hopefully that will give you some guidance if you want to make your own complete template, not even use my template, but just I hope that this is a good video that will give you guidance on setting up your own templates. Remember, there are no rules, there are no defaults, there's no right, there's no wrong. Don't have anybody tell you on YouTube or anywhere else that the way they're doing it is the ultimate way to do it and you can't do it any other way, because that's just utter crap. Don't believe it. Just be suspicious of anyone that says things like that, frankly, in my opinion. So I hope this template helps. Download it, share it, do whatever you want to do with it. I prefer it if you didn't sell it, but if you can sleep at night and sell it, do it. Go for it. It's not a problem. I'm completely zen. This is the Craig's Motel. My name's Conan. Till next time.